Depending on the depth of the hole you're in, you gotta have at least 3 to 5 survival skills to, actually survive. Now, by all means, this doesn't mean you need to think and act like Bear Grylls, but if you do, then cool. But what I am trying to say here is that survival is a matter of how equipped you are to handle whatever emergency that comes your way. What's up, fellow preppers? I'm Scott from Ant Prepper, and today, I am going to recommend some of the most critical survival skills that you need to learn as soon as possible. But before I begin, I humbly ask each of you to hit the like and subscribe buttons. Those little clicks will help me create more videos that are helpful to preppers, and those who simply want to survive this crazy world. Now let's get started. Starting a fire on a bad weather. It's easy to build a fire if the conditions are good and favorable to you, but have you ever tried making one under a winter storm or a rainy day? Truth be told, it's not easy, as most of the elements needed to start a fire are actually drenched by water. Still, there's no other way here but to try. The first thing you have to do is find dry wood and kindling. In any ecosystem you are in, you need to find these things. Dry grass and bark shavings are among the ones you can extract in the wild, but if you are prepared enough, a commercial fire starter could save your life. But some situations will require you to improvise. A good example would be a battery and steel wool. By touching a steel wool pad to the positive and negative terminals of a battery, you can actually create enough heat to ignite the wool, which of course can be used to start a fire. Another one is focusing the sun's rays through a lens or magnifying glass. Your kids can do this, so I bet you can do so too. There's nothing wrong if you want to go old school as well, such as learning how to use a fire plow or hand drill. But creating a fire is just the start of the process. You need to maintain the fire, which would also mean that you have to create a shelter or find a natural windbreaker, such as a fallen log or rock overhang, to prevent your fire from being put off. Heck, you can also dig a small pit to cover the fire. Water filtration and gathering. After building a fire, you need to secure your water supply. No water, no survival. That's the basic rule, and by all means, it applies to all situations where help isn't certain. There are a lot of water facts that I can throw here, but the point is that if you don't sustain your body with water, your chances of survival decrease. The basic way of filtering water is to remove the visible dirt and debris. For this task, you can improvise, such as using bandanas and clothing to sift out large particles like insects, sand, and small twigs. Assuming that fire is already available, you can start boiling the water. Just because you removed the visible contaminants doesn't mean that the water is already potable. Boiling kills pathogens like bacteria, viruses, and parasites, and it works wonders most of the time. A good boil should be around 3 minutes. If you are at higher altitudes, let's say 6,500 feet or higher, boil a little longer. There's also this thing called solar disinfection, where you fill a clear plastic bottle with water and leave it in direct sunlight for at least 6 hours or so. The sun has UV after all, and it's potent enough to kill bacteria and viruses. Of course, you can skip these steps if you have a portable water filter with you. Life straw or Sawyer filters have been quite effective in filtering bacteria, microplastics, and protozoa. If there's no obvious water source, you need to be extra desperate and creative. One of the possible methods I know is collecting dew in the early morning. You can collect them from grass, leaves, or rocks using any absorbent material you have, such as a clean cloth. Building shelter. Once you have fire and water, it's time to build or find a shelter. After all, you need to have a place where you can recuperate or be safe from the elements. Assuming that you don't have a tent with you, you need to be able to build one. The first thing you need to do here is look for a safe spot, and when I say safe, what I mean are those areas that aren't under dead trees, prone to flooding, or near insect nests. The best locations, if available, are natural windbreakers such as boulders and logs. If there's a cave, that should save you a lot of time and energy from building a shelter from top to bottom. If you need to build one, there are several types of shelters you can build. A debris hut is ideal in forests, where you simply have to stack leaves, branches, and other natural debris so that you can have an insulated shelter. Basically, you have to lean a large branch against a tree or log, or whatever sturdy foundation is available, at an angle close to or exactly at 45 degrees. Then cover it with smaller branches and debris for insulation. If you are on snowy terrain, a quinsy is the best form of shelter you can build. In a nutshell, you can make one by piling snow into a mound and letting it settle before you dig a hollow space inside. The interior should give you some degree of insulation. And oh, for insulation, try layering leaves, pine needles, or grass under your shelter and on top to insulate from the cold and weather. A thick layer of insulation is key to keeping your shelter a bit cozy. Foraging and hunting food. Personally, foraging is a skill that you must learn, even if you are not anticipating something bad is going to happen to you. You see, being able to identify edible plants is beneficial for a lot of reasons, but it comes extremely handy once you are dealing with life and death scenarios. Foraging isn't something you can't learn in a day, but there are a few basic rules that you need to adhere to, such as focusing on familiar plants that you recognize, such as cattails, clove, and dandelions. However, if you are surrounded by plant species that you don't recognize, there's a universal edibility test that you might want to follow. First, rub a small piece of that plant in your skin and wait for around 15 minutes. If there's no reaction, try placing a small portion on your lips, then your tongue, and wait for another 15 to 30 minutes for reactions. If there's still no irritation, chew and wait until 30 minutes before swallowing. However, don't consume large quantities of that plant until you are sure it's safe. When it comes to nuts, seeds, and berries, my rules are quite simple. Just avoid those white, yellow, and red berries unless you are certain of their kind. If possible, just go with those you are familiar with, such as pine nuts and acorns. These yields are calorie-rich, so they are really worth having in any emergencies. And hey, steer clear of mushrooms unless you're a shroom expert. I only consume mushrooms that I personally planted. Look, the majority of them are toxic and can be fatal, so I really encourage people not to try them unless there's a certainty that they know what they are doing. Also, avoid plants with milky sap, spines, or a bitter smell. More likely than not, these plants are dangerous. Trauma treatment. I want to go beyond the basic first aid here because there's a big chance that any tragedy or shtf scenario could wreck your body. Trauma treatment is often overlooked, but it's definitely a crucial survival skill. After all, your chances of getting out alive gradually subside if your limbs are immobile or one or two of your major bones get fractured. The first step in treating a trauma is knowing whether you are in a life-threatening situation. Basically, you need to check if you sustained heavy bleeding, head injury, or broken bones. If you spot something severe, keep calm and do the things I'm about to say next. For cases of bleeding, apply direct pressure to the wound using a bandage or cloth. If it's severe, a tourniquet is your last resort. Make one, place it above the wound, and tighten it until the bleeding gradually stops. If possible, elevate the injured area to control the blood flow. There's also the likelihood that a disaster could cause shock to people. To treat this situation, you need to lay that person flat with their feet elevated, but don't do this if that person has a spinal or head injury. You need to address the anxiety factor, and the best way to do this is to keep the person warm by embracing them or placing blankets around them. If the person is conscious and isn't vomiting, then hydrate them. When it comes to broken bones, splinting is the way to go. Sticks or any straight objects you can find can get the job done. Just tighten and secure the splint with bandages or cloth. And please, for the love of God, don't realign the bones. Just immobilize them. Thanks for watching. Times are tough, but I hope that with these videos we will be able to plan, prepare, and act accordingly. Take care and be ready at all times. See you in my next videos.